Hi guys! If you are interested in the full-length painting guide, the link is in the video description. First, I cover the skin with daemonette hide. This layer will act as our darkest shadow. I tried to paint these undead skin tones a little bit differently every time, and I'm very excited about this one. Daemonette hide is a quite desaturated purple, but it will create a very saturated shadow tone for the skin because saturation is relative next to other values. The hard part at this step is to figure out which parts of the mini are the skin and which parts are the teared up suit. The thighs are quite exposed, but the arms are covered with these reggy parts, so we need to differentiate these areas. If you need to, go back with some black to fix the suit to make this process a little bit easier to see where you need to highlight the skin in the further step. Next, I mix some flat yellow to the daemonette hide. It's a desaturated yellow, which will increase the value of the daemonette hide, and it's a complementary color to daemonette hide. Since the surface on this mini that we can work on is quite small, I'm using layering for sketching and blending the highlights. With layering, you need to create smaller and smaller layers on top of each other with thin layers of paint to build up the opacity and create a smooth gradient. Light is coming from the top and a little bit from the left, so we can add more volume to the left thigh, right arm and right side of the face. Since the face is in a tilted position, the left side of the face should have bigger shadow areas. I push the contrast on the previously highlighted areas while reducing the size of these highlights with some ice yellow in the mix. I'm using the same layering technique to smooth out my blends and to reach the maximum opacity the current mixture of paint can provide. Next, I cover the eyes and the parts where the flesh showing through the rotting skin and cover those with burnt red with a base layer consistency. This will bring out those details on the skin and make the fleshy parts more bloody looking and add some depth and an extra layer to the skin. After that, I paint the eyes and teeth. On this part, I made some mistakes on the teeth because the paint consistency I was using was a little bit too thin and flowed into the mouth recess. Now, what you can do real fast here is use a damp brush and wipe off the paint from the area where you don't want this color. The damp brush will leave some water over the surface, so we need to remove that with a paper towel. Reapply our previous color, which was the burnt red in this case. And while that layer dries, we can work on the other eye. Now, I didn't nail this left eye for the first time, so I had to go back with burnt red again and give it a second try. Painting eyes is hard, especially on 32mm. So it's completely normal if you don't paint perfect eyes every time, but keep trying to have a nice result, or I will slap on your tiny hand. Back to the skin. I add more ice yellow to the mix to push the contrast more, and I use the same thin layer consistency to reduce the volumes on my highlight areas. With this value, I don't go over the back of the legs because the glutes are blocking the light for them, and they are located in the shadow area, so I highlight the skin on the front to add more depth to it. I said that painting eyes on 32mm is quite challenging, but the good part about 32mm is that you can be quite fast painting it, especially on female miniatures like this one, because you have so little surface to work with. You can paint these much faster than a bulky guy with some muscles. With a little bit more ice yellow in the mix, I reduce the highlight areas more over the thighs, arm and the face. I only cover my previous highlight 50% over the thigh, so our focal point could move more towards the face. My paint consistency is a little bit thinner here. It's not really a glaze, but a very thin layer. The higher I go in value, the thinner layers I like to use because it leaves me more room for making mistakes. If your paint is very thick and opaque, a wrongly placed highlight could give you lots of extra work fixing those previous blends, but making a mistake with thinner consistency is quite easy to fix. To bring out the necrotic blisters on the skin, I use 2 to 3 layers of flat yellow over them. These bumps are mostly inside the teared up holes of the skin, but some can be found closely around them. Try to cover only the top part of these blisters to complement the sphere shape of each of them and make them more round. As with most of the zombie heroes, I glaze over the eyes with fluorescent orange. The paint consistency is very thin, so you need a couple of layers around the eyes and over the eyes. The main thing here is that you won't let the paint pull up over the eyeball, but move the paint over the eye socket. This will create this very simple but very effective glow effect over the eyes that I really like. The eyes become this very glowy and saturated color next to our pale dead skin, and will bring the focal point over the face way more. After that, I glaze some more with burnt red. I give 2 layers to the teeth to mute them back, and since burnt red is a very dark red color, is great for a coagulated blood effect. Zombies usually don't have very nice white teeth. They always have some darker teeth thanks to their bloody diet. I also glaze over the blisters to make them more inflamed looking and create a ring around them on the more highlighted areas, to blackline them with a little bit thicker consistency and to add more definition to the skin. To add more variety to the rotten flesh parts, I mixed some ice yellow to the burnt red and picked out some fibers over these areas to add more detail to them. Always angle the mini in a way that you won't ruin the highlights on the skin to reach these little holes, and only highlight the area inside them. Add more ice yellow to the mix and continue the process over the side of the torso and the face. On the side of the torso, you can paint these highlights like these are some broken rib cages, so maybe that's why the skin and the suit teared up here, since the bomb punctured the skin and was easier for the skin to rot away here. Or any scenario you made up works just as fine. But do have an idea what to paint, otherwise you can't really paint what you don't understand. Okay? Okay. With pure ice yellow in the mix, reduce these highlight areas even more. I said it a couple of times, but if you don't have one already, try to get a magnifying lamp to see these little details. Magnifying glasses are good as well, but I think a lamp is just way better. I will leave a link in the description to show you the one I'm using. I'm not sponsored, obviously, but you need magnification to paint these small details. I know you guys watch painters with superhuman eyesight that don't use magnifying lens or glasses, but most of us need these kind of tools. Okay, let's start working on the hair. Psylocke has very dark purple hair, so to replicate that, we need to highlight 50% of the surface and leave the rest of the hair black. I create 3 main sections for my highlights. These 3 sections are the same where the hair drops on the shape. The first one is on the top of the skull, the second where it drops over the shoulder, and the third one is around the waist area. The third area is only for our mid-tone to make the hair more purple looking than black. Now with a higher value purple, I reduce my highlights over the hair. I try to follow the folds of the hair that I previously highlighted, and I sketch these highlights as a whole and not picking out the hairs one by one.
Let the world around us sleep. We'll cherish secrets that we keep.
I continue the process with Delilah Lilac. This time I leave some darker recessed shadows between the hair locks to add more depth to the hair. My brushstrokes always follows the direction where the hair goes, so the highlights feel more organic. I use multiple thin layers to blend in these highlights and build up the opacity of the paint.
This moment, we're alone.
On the top of the skull, I add my maximum highlight with the same approach, painting thin lines inside my Delilah Lilac layer to make it more defined and to keep the focal point on the face. Thank you for watching, and a huge thanks to my patrons for supporting these kind of videos. If you like to see more Marvel Zombies tutorials and interested in PDF tutorials for characters that won't receive a video guide, please consider joining my Patreon page. Thanks to all the ones that slapping on hands like Coddledy Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, Penoman45, Michael Kerr, Gerard Krish, and Adam Holt. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.